I remember when I worked at different stations around the country for different networks, and I was always told that if the Super Bowl came around, we would have to refer to it as the big game if we didn't have it on our network. But considering we are CBS with News Channel 5 here in Nashville, the Super Bowl was just the other day. I bring this up because we had two people from Middle Tennessee who were playing on the 49ers, Jordan Mason and Jauan Jennings, one of which I honestly thought had a pretty good shot at winning Super Bowl MVP if the 49ers won. Jauan was playing lights out. I don't know if you saw the game. The man not only threw the first touchdown of the game, but he also caught a touchdown and had big plays. Jauan went to Blackman High School out of Murfreesboro. What's funny about his story is that out of nowhere, I get this message, this Facebook message from the good folks of Cowan, Tennessee. Just to give you some context, News Channel 5 ran a story about how Jordan Mason went from Gallatin to the Super Bowl. And then the family of Jauan Jennings, they sent me a message saying, hey, like, don't forget now, Jauan is playing in the Super Bowl. We want you to know so that you don't forget about him when you start mentioning people from Tennessee who are playing in the big game.
Jauan Jennings grew up in Cowan, Tennessee, but also calls Murfreesboro home. When he was a sophomore, he transferred to Blackman High School. John McCreary, the defensive football coach at the time, knew Jennings was an exceptional athlete.
He would elevate practice in his competitiveness. Ask him to do anything, he could do it.
As the quarterback, he helped Blackman High School's football team get to a championship in 2013.
And as I'm watching the game, I keep hearing his name come up. And he's making big play after big play. He throws the touchdown. And I'm freaking out. I'm telling my friends at the watch party, I'm like, you have no idea how crazy this is right now. This man may end up being Super Bowl MVP. They just couldn't pull it off. They couldn't pull it off. The Chiefs went back to back. Mahomes and Taylor and company, they won another Super Bowl.
So Jennings' stats for the season, by the way, going into the Super Bowl. This is for all season. 19 catches, 265 yards, 1 touchdown.
Going into the game.
That was for all of 2023. That's all I got.
Talk about making it count when it counts, right? I think really that's what I got for that one, unless you got something else.
Well, we can't move on from the Super Bowl without talking about the halftime show.
You want to talk about the halftime show?
We got to talk about the halftime.
Let's talk about the halftime show, shall we? The celebration of all things Atlanta is what it was. You had Ludacris, you had Jermaine Dupri, you had Usher, obviously. It was a beautiful sight. A beautiful sight. R&B classic. What are you looking up there? I see you dabbling with the phone. What are you trying to pull up?
Do you know when Usher's last #1 hit was?
Last #1 hit?
Last #1 hit, according to Billboard.
2017.
Not even close.
What?
2010.
2010?
He hasn't had a #1 since 2010.
Come on now. It wasn't my favorite Super Bowl performance.
What's your favorite?
Prince.
Everyone goes back to Prince.
Purple Rain, In the Rain. Are you kidding me? Yes, absolutely. Michael Jackson's a close second. Beyonce's a third.
Wrap up our Super Bowl talk with the required Taylor Swift discussion.
Why is it required?
I was under the assumption that you can't cover the NFL without talking about Taylor Swift at this point.
Let's do it.
How long do you think she was on TV for during the Super Bowl, during the game itself?
I like this question. 2 minutes.
55 seconds.
55 seconds.
That's it.
I definitely thought 2 minutes was on the lower end, because you have to imagine, like, the camera, as soon as the game was over, you saw the camera that was hovering around Travis. I don't know what kind of lens that was on there. Like, they were trying to capture the moment, and they almost missed it. 3 months. She willed a Super Bowl in 3 months. President Biden's tweet, he's just hysterical. He's like, well, just like we planned it. Just like we drew it up. We're gonna move on from this. I promise you, we're gonna move on from this. If you stuck around for the game, you had a chance to see a very special edition of News Channel 5 at 10. For the first time anywhere, we're hearing from the son of the controversial diet guru Gwen Shamblin. The now 43-year-old Michael Shamblin spoke exclusively to News Channel 5 investigative reporter Phil Williams. When you hear Phil talk about this interview, he says it's unlike any interview he's done before. Michael had been told that Phil was literally the devil.
The devil.
Oh yes, you were Satan incarnate to the remnant early on, because of course Gwen was telling us all that.
So you have this interesting dynamic where this young kid saw all of this happening before his eyes. He saw Phil reporting. He heard about what was happening with the, Remnant Fellowship Church. And now years later, he says, not only does he remember it, but he regrets some of the things that were happening.
Where's Michael? Where's my son?
Michael was just 23.
You got to keep in mind, my son, this is, to see someone attack his mom is hard. But anyway, I know that.
We were showing him that video from 20 years ago when he suddenly reacted.
It did bother me.
That I was asking those kind of questions of your mother.
It did. To be completely honest, I was bothered.
You were pissed.
I was. And that was hard on me. But that's what makes it even more incredible now that I'm sitting here, have come full circle 180.
I look back on my life and go, what were we doing? What was I thinking? I wish I could go back and see my earlier self and go, no, this was not. There are people being hurt here. You're not 100% innocent and perfect going along with this. You thought we were headed up, but it was a decline.
I think there are a lot of people out there who were like me and didn't know much about the backstory behind Gwen Shamblin and all of this until she died. For those who haven't seen the Way Down documentary on HBO Max, make the time. I wish that I had known a lot about this before.
What motivated Gwen Shamblin?
Praise, power. She loved the attention. She loved the spotlight.
Remnant Nation, it is my prayer for you to be born again.
And the spotlight was just what she found as the head of Remnant Fellowship.
Some inside Remnant viewed her as a prophet. Are you a prophet?
I don't believe I know what my gift name is. So I will tell you, I'm still wrestling with that. I've been told that for years.
When she was asked, she never would answer that question directly.
Do you have any kind of official title with the church?
I'm Gwen.
How did she see herself?
I believe she absolutely saw herself as a prophet. I believe she saw herself as having the answer to all of life's problems.
We find out that Gwen Shamblin died in this horrific plane crash. And I think a lot of people started looking back into the history of who this person was. This documentary series follows Gwen Shamblin's rise from one of the most influential diet gurus in the country at the time into what some people described as becoming a cult leader. So Phil investigated her Way Down workshop for years. This is where they told people you should only really eat when you start to hear rumbling in your stomach. Of course, you have a remnant family accused of beating their child to death. You had Gwen Shamblin saying, we believe in not sparing the rod. Much of the downfall, happened when we started seeing deadly consequences for some of the things that were being said by Gwen and some of her followers.
People have been hurt, fallen by the wayside, have been victim to it. People have been financially hurt by it. It's hard to call it a church in my mind. It is a church, but it's a cult.
You think it is a cult?
I do believe it's a cult.
Why do you say that?
Because it's a group of people who are devoted to a person, Gwen Shamblin, Laura.
I think one of the big questions some people have about this is why now? Remnant Fellowship still exists post-Gwen. His sister, Michael's sister, currently runs the church. And in Michael's view, he does believe it's a cult.
The why now is interesting. I remember Phil sending a text message to the group saying, you won't believe who just contacted me. You won't believe who wants to sit down and do an interview. And Phil jumped at the opportunity. He said that their interview was about 2.5 hours long. There was so much that Michael had to say about the church, about his involvement, about the fact that he never really cried after his mom died, which startled Phil.
And I noticed you don't call her mom, you don't call her mother, you call her Gwen.
That's from habit. I quit calling her mother probably around 2010.
Why?
Because we were so at odds.
You still got more pieces to come.
Jano. Of what?
Of Michael.
Really?
Phil's not done yet. There's still several more pieces there.
Of course. This Phil guy, this Phil character, you guys got, I'm gonna move on to the next thing. Metro Nashville police say they're looking for 2 separate people involved in 2 separate attempted rapes not far from downtown Nashville. The most recent one happened in the Capitol View area, which if you know Capitol View, that's only a few blocks from downtown. The area is almost brand new. There's so many different buildings and so many different restaurants and, stores and all of that there's people there almost all hours of the day. I think that's what caught me off guard the most about this, is that I've been to Capitol View. I've looked around. There's people everywhere. Granted, this did happen at around 1 a.m. in the morning, but still, I know that the apartment complex they have over there, filled with people. I can imagine they're walking back from downtown, back to their apartments, and I think that may have been the case in this situation.
Saturday at 1:45 in the morning, police say a 30-year-old woman was walking home when she was grabbed from behind and knocked to the ground by a suspect who was trying to pull her clothes off. It happened on 11th Avenue North, and according to police, the woman put up a fight. Then a witness in a parking garage across the street started yelling, and it scared the suspect off.
It's a scary thought. But then you find out that police are also looking for someone from a few days earlier, over in Germantown this time. There was another person who attacked someone jogging.
In a separate case on Sunday, police were called to the Cumberland River Greenway to investigate an attempted rape at 2nd Avenue North and Cement Plant Road. A runner was put into a chokehold and slammed into a fence. A witness saw the suspect on top of the 25-year-old, pulled him off, and he ran away. Before the attack, the suspect was seen walking away from a nearby homeless camp, according to sex crimes detectives.
And it took someone like a good Samaritan jumping in to pry this person off of the victim. Thankfully, we have photos of these 2 people. We heard from Mayor Freddie O'Connell. Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell said that they are trying to hire more police officers so that they can properly canvass the area and make sure that people feel safe. I lived in Germantown. I remember people were always running up and down that track back there. I never once thought that could be a dangerous area.
I think this is one of the challenges for a growing city. You're going to have people out, just at all times of day.
See, and I worry that someone may use the excuse of Nashville becoming this growing city to say, well, you should expect some of these things to happen. You should expect that to happen. And I don't think that should ever be the case. We have law enforcement for a reason. What I'm trying to say is that we need to be vigilant of these neighborhoods where all of a sudden we're getting an influx of people. For the people who live in these neighborhoods, I think they themselves have to be a little more vigilant as well, because we can't take for granted that certain neighborhoods like a Capitol View or a Germantown, where we know everyone's going, is always going to be safe.
A lot of people in Nashville are kind of transplants, so some people in Nashville might not realize that there are still some places where things like this can happen, but it's still a good city. There are great areas. It's just a couple of bad people.
It is important to be more vigilant, but it's sad that we need to be.
That's where we are. Tennessee lawmakers have a bill in the works right now that would make GPS monitoring a condition of bail for certain domestic abuse offenses. So if you're charged with aggravated assault of a partner and you've either caused bodily harm or you showed a weapon, well, you could be forced to wear one of these GPS monitoring devices as a condition of your bail. That way, law enforcement knows that you're not going to go after the victim once you're released. The story behind this bill goes back to one of the most tragic stories that I've covered here at NewsChannel 5. Marie Varsos and Debbie Sisko were both shot and killed by Marie's estranged husband, Sean Varsos, back in 2021. This was a murder-suicide. At the time, it just seemed like we were getting bits and pieces of details of what happened. It wasn't until months later that someone reached out and said, you need to hear what happened to these women. Sean at the time was out on bail after a fight with Marie where he choked her until she was unconscious. He also threatened her with his gun. When Marie finally was able to, escape and tell the cops what happened, they gave her an order of protection against Sean. Sean asks for a continuance in this case because he doesn't have an attorney yet. He gets a continuance for April 19th. On April 12th, he parks his car outside Marie's mother's home. He waits there for hours, sees them, and he opens fire. They were on the phone with 911 while this was happening. We hear Sean running into the home. We hear Marie frantically rushing for her gun. We hear gunshots going back and forth, and then we hear silence. Easily one of the toughest things that I've ever heard in my life. Alex Jauan has been advocating for his family. He has been at the forefront of different legislation to make sure that other domestic violence victims have protections.
Last April, my mother, Deborah Sisko, and my sister, Marie Varsos, were murdered by my brother-in-law. And over the following 5 weeks until their homicide, my sister, my mother, myself, and the rest of our family did everything we could to navigate the very bureaucratic process domestic violence face every day here in Tennessee.
It's a very tragic story, but I believe that had we had this bill in place at the time of their murder, that it could have hopefully saved their lives. It would at least give them an opportunity to seek safety and refuge from their attacker.
And in this case, he believes that a GPS bill would have protected his sister. Because when you think about it, a GPS monitoring device would be able to notify law enforcement that this guy's sitting outside the house. They would have notified the victim that this person is within the vicinity of your home. On top of that, the suspects, the people who are accused of domestic violence, those are the folks who actually have to pay for this. There are a lot of layers to this story, because not only are we talking about domestic violence, not only are we talking about mental health, but we're talking about access to firearms. Here we have someone who signed an affidavit saying that they turned over their guns because of this order of protection, but it was a piece of paper. It's a piece of paper that says, I am not going to access my firearms. And I've talked to attorneys, I've talked to judges at this point who say there really is no checks and balances to make sure that people don't have access after the fact, after they sign these things. And so that's another bill in itself that people are working through, that lawmakers are working through. But you just think about this one case, it encompasses so much, so many different layers.
I wanted to make sure my contact info was correct, because both times when he was served with order protection and when he was arrested, I never got a notification.
While some of these things may seem like they're small, when it comes to domestic violence homicides, these are things that could really save somebody's life.
But Alex Jauan, the son of Debbie Sisko, the brother of Marie Varsos, he says this one bill, the GPS bill, could have saved their lives.
Domestic violence advocacy groups will tell you how hard it is already to get victims to come forward. Yeah. They're worried about their own protection. They're worried whether they'll be taken seriously. Maybe something like this can give them a little more confidence.
I think GPS monitoring will go a long way. Really quick though, last thing about that. The technology already exists. I think people need to understand that part of the thing. The technology already exists. Judges can already make sure that someone has GPS monitoring on them. You've seen that, you see this all the time with people who are charged with pretty severe crimes. We should be able to apply it in this case. Just something to keep in mind. One of the best things I saw this past week, people helping people. The Nashville Jeep Club just raised thousands of dollars to help benefit families who lost practically everything in the tornadoes just this past year in Clarksville.
Good music and good company don't do it for you.
Next, 989-1997.
A good cause might.
It's just phenomenal to be a part of it.
The Show and Shine fundraiser you see here, it was put on by the Nashville Jeep Club, Outlaw Off-Road Nashville, and Crazy Light Off-Road.
NewsChannel 5's Nikki Hauser was there as all of these folks gathered to donate what they could to just help these families. In the moment when these tornadoes happened, of course it was tragic. We were there covering it, but then we started seeing other severe weather. Your mind goes elsewhere for a while and you forget that these folks are still picking up the pieces for their homes. In the middle of all that, just because something else happened doesn't mean people aren't still feeling the impacts of what happened before. These organizations with the Nashville Jeep Club and others, they made sure that we don't forget.
If you drive through in some areas, it's still really disheartening to see, you know, the damage that's still there. We've been able to help families who's needed rent for while their homes are being repaired or while they've been displaced waiting on insurance companies. We've been able to help families be able to get groceries and things of that, you know, just the necessities to be able to try to make a terrible situation a little bit better.
Some of these folks were talking in the story about how the tornado just barely missed their home, but then they saw across the street and their neighbors' homes are devastated. So what do? They help their neighbor. I think that's pretty cool. Tell your friends about this. You know, we love your feedback, and maybe help us pick a name for this thing as well. I need your help. I need your help. You've now seen what we do with this. It's a conversation about stories that catch my attention throughout the week, you know, from in and around Nashville. So whatever you call that. We have a whiteboard full of names, and you're about to see it right there. Don't judge me on some of the things that are on there right now. Like, we're everything. We're throwing everything in kitchen sink on there.
All the bad ideas are his.
Why would you say that?
Because it's true.
Unbelievable. I'm trying to make sure that this is something that I would normally say. So whatever that is. And again, the other part of it, don't call it Levi's show or anything like that. That's not what this is. This is a show that happens to be hosted by me on a consistent basis, but that's not what it's about. We're talking about stories.
We're looking at fill-in hosts in the future.
Who?
We're looking at fill-in hosts in the future, you know. I hear that Phil Williams guy's really good. We can probably get him up here.
He's all right. I think that's it. That's it.